trips, so just to be mindful of what's going on.
I know, just mentioning it, Paul, I know I mentioned it once before, but this is the December updates, not November.
It is December updates, I just haven't changed the date. Some of them are the same, actually, because I just thought it's worth reminding you of some that happened in November, because I just take a copy of the previous one, so it is December, absolutely it is, but we're going to kick off anyway. So thank you very much, as always, for coming along to this Techy Tuesday updates of all the updates that Google have sent through on the admin panel. Happy New Year to everyone. Delighted to see everyone here today. Great that we've got a good number, and we'll kick straight off. So I've kept some things in from November anyway, which is because, like I say, I just do a copy of the slide deck. And this one I think is quite an important one, because I'm aware that you're here as an administrator for your organizations and institutions, and it might well be that you are lucky enough to have a team of people. You might be the only person there, but you might actually be lucky enough to have a team of other people that you use. And so it feels beholden to me to remind you that you should be thinking about, are there tasks that I can sensibly delegate to other members of my team? And the updates to the storage management within the admin console is definitely one that you could think about delegating to somebody else within the organization, so you can manage how storage is managed across the organization. And like all these kind of subsets of management tools, rather than giving them super admin where they have access to everything including delete the internet button, they only get access to a specific sub-organization if you choose to give them that. So they could just manage the storage limits in the shared drives within a single school if you're a multi-school domain and you've got sub-organizations and things. So you can think about how you manage some of those day-to-day tasks that you currently manage yourself by delegating it to other people, and it just gives you that little bit of control, and you can decide what the limit is on those particular things. Once you start to use these, and I will ask in a minute if anyone's started to use them yet, because this has been around for a while, you get information within the report of that particular organization. It tells you what's Drive, what's Gmail, what's, I think there's two other things, is it Meet, and one other. It gives you a little breakdown by color coding, so you know what the usage is within that shared drive. So it's kind of handy to know that you've got that. So just to be aware that you've got that tool to delegate. Not the only delegated task you could do, don't forget. In my last school, about 4 staff, I think it was, across it was quite a spread out campus, my last school. So 4 staff, once we'd done the initial training, had help desk admin. So it meant that the kids that were professional password collectors didn't spend 20% of their life wandering around corridors looking for the one person that could reset their password. There were multiple people across the site they could go to, so they were in the corridor for less time. So there are a number of kind of sub-admin roles that you can think about delegating responsibilities for. There's a services one, there's a storage one now, so on and so forth. So think about that within your role. Are there tasks you can delegate? And this is a good example to think about managing those shared drives. So that's that one. This is still from last one. This is a reminder that's coming up ever so much closer now. If you've got people still wedded to classic sites, they need to think about converting them. The conversion tool is really simple to use. I literally just ticked all of my sites and converted them all. Dave, you got a question? Is it about page level permissions? Need to unmute Dave.
It's not, because I know that you're going to call that out anyway. Sorry, the question was relating back to the previous slide on the you had a line in there about limits being applied to shared drives.
Yeah.
Just to point out to people that change is going to start coming in from the 23rd of January. And if you don't apply a default permission, then the default that Google apply is 100 gigabytes for each shared drive. So when I've been on there today, I think I've got 8 shared drives that exceed 100 gigabytes. If I hadn't made a change, then all of those shared drives would have become read-only at the point that rollout hit my domain. So I just feel it's worth flagging that up as action that potentially needs to be taken by people. It's really easy to do the change. If you go into your Google admin panel and go to the storage icon, which is the bottom icon on the menu to the left hand side, and then go to storage settings and manage, then you can change those limits on both a top level domain basis and an organizational unit basis. And I feel that's just really important to potentially stop some of the people on the call getting calls from the users complaining that they can no longer write to shared drives. So I just felt it was probably worth shouting out and underlining at that point, Paul.
No, brilliant. That's really useful. Actually, I didn't know that. I missed that. That's really helpful. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks. Just quick comment, Paul. Is it worth just updating the deck as well after this session, just to indicate the limit on the shared storage and whatnot for that?
Yeah, I will do. I'll update that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just a quick question, Dave. Do you have to say put a limit on and then specify the limit, or do you? So one of the settings is the limit is off. Is that what you're saying is going?
That's what's going to change. So at the moment, you can choose to have the setting on or off. If it is off when the change, I'm going to say the 23rd of January because that's when it's rolling out from, but we all know that it takes potentially a couple of weeks to hit your domain. But if that is set to off when the change comes, then Google will apply the 100 gigabyte limit. Within that same storage page, it will show you your shared drives using the most storage as well. So you can see, what kind of limit you might need to set it as. So I made the change this morning. I just turned it on, set it to be a terabyte for my domains. So now that my shared Google Drives have a limit, but it is a limit that is high enough to allow me to continue to write to those shared drives. And it's just something that I've set a reminder in my calendar to check on a monthly basis.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
No problem.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Dave. That's fantastic. Excuse me. Okay, so back to sites. Classic Sites Manager. End of the month, it's going to automatically get turned off. You're going to get pushed over to all new sites, so they won't be able to do anything with them. Google will do the conversion automatically. You can use Google Takeout to take them out, should you want to, if for any reason that's the case. But I think it's far better to get individuals to get in there and think, well, actually, I've not even visited that site in 6 years, so I might just as well delete that one as do anything else with it and just convert the ones they actually do use and do need. And yeah, Dave and I are on a campaign. I've sent my request in for page level permissions because that's one of the reasons that Dave was quite rightly waiting, because he was thinking, well, I'll wait until I've got page level permissions in place before I do any of those conversions, because the old sites gave you page level permissions and currently the new sites don't. So a request from me, because I think page level permissions is really powerful. I used it loads when I used to use Classic Sites. If you haven't made that request and you think you might like that, do please use the question mark, use the help file to make a feature request for page level permissions in new sites, because it's currently not there. Okay, so that's Google Sites. These are just updates. I'm going to fly past these. Trust rules in Google Drive, and I will ask for comments about these, because whilst I understand in principle how they work, I'm keen to explore this as a thing. I think it's going to change over to trust rules this month, I think it said, because it's now generally available. Everyone will have them, and you can basically, you've got a much finer control over how and who and what people can and can't share. It's Education Standard and Education Plus only, but it just allows you to think carefully about how you're going to manage those things, because there will be people within your organization, within say senior leadership or within finance, for example. So your finance group email, you might allow all them to share financial information with a warning out to a whitelisted allow list of domains, for example, because they've got to share financial information with your local authority, for example. So you can build those rules in, and then once those rules are in place that allows them to do their normal kind of workflows, you can then set a rule that says, well, beyond that, nothing else is shareable. So it allows you to keep control of the data and reduces the risk of you losing data, and at the same time allows those people that need to share sensitive data or financial information or any of those things to be able to share it with the relevant people. So I think it's definitely something that is worth looking at. And so my question is have people started to look at their trust rules and get things in place so that they can have better control over their data and how it gets shared internally and externally?
Paul, can I ask a question about that in terms of sharing externally? I'm assuming this is coming from a user's not personal, but they are my drive. Then they are personal Google Drive rather than a shared drive.
Yeah,
we've had a few issues with sharing shared drives externally, where you have to move the drive to another part of the organization that has external sharing rights, but that only controls sharing on the drive. So anybody who's a member of that drive can potentially share externally.
Yeah.
Is that going to change? Do you know if that's going to change? Because it's quite a flow for us, because we tended to control it by user, only allowing certain users to share externally, trusted users. And when it's going down to folder level and people have options to add users to folders, then the sharing sort of control goes out the window.
Yeah. When you talk about the content managers now in Google Share Drives can share by folder. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I think this is the biggest challenge for Google Workspace, and it's the biggest paradigm change in the way that you work. You've got to think really carefully about your sharing protocols within your organization, and you've got to work really hard to train your staff to follow them. Now, at the same time, of course, yes, you want to give them the best level of sharing possible. And it's totally legitimate that certainly staff ought to be able to share outside the organization for legitimate reasons, collaborating with other colleagues and so on and so forth.
Yep.
But at the same time, you've got to keep your data safe, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah. The data loss protection rules, as I understand them, allows you to do that. So if you, let's say, for example, if you take a national insurance number, for example, or a credit card number, that 16-digit number, you can create data loss protection rules within your domain that says, if this data format is shared externally, stop it being shared. So you can, whatever sharing you allow your users within your organization, internally or externally, those don't owe the data loss protection rules usurp those sharing rules. So if someone's allowed to share externally, but you've got a rule that says if someone tries to share a national insurance number, stop it, then it will stop it. Yeah. Even though the user is allowed to share externally. So it's that combination of thinking really carefully about what is the best policy, and it's that fine balance, isn't it, of maximum learning and optimum security. Yeah,
it is.
There's a balance, and
yeah, it's quite scary that what users can potentially do. They could potentially download.
Think about data loss. I mean, you've got the option to set prompts, haven't you? So if someone tries to share personal information or financial information, you can set it that staff get a prompt saying, are you aware that this contains this information? So you can already do that.
Okay.
So there's that option, isn't there? Or then just think more carefully about this is a whole institution discussion and training implication that we need to get our heads around. We need to get the right rules in place to keep as much of the things we possibly can secure as we can. And the other part of it is that what the trust rules allow. So let's say you've got, let's take financial information as an example. So that's in place. So you can't share any financial information, bank account numbers, that 6-digit sort code, because they follow a pattern. You can put an expression in that says, if it follows this pattern, don't share it.
Yeah.
But then you can then set another rule that says the exception is that this group are allowed because they're in the finance team, but they'll get a prompt saying, do you know you're sharing financial information? Okay. So it's about taking the time, and I think it needs a big discussion to fully work all of that out. So that's my take. Can I open it up to the floor? And does anyone else want to add any thoughts in about that? I've already started down that route of thinking about how they manage all of this.
I'm just interested. I've been out of education for 18 months. Hi, everybody, and Happy New Year. Just interested in the old format of getting a document and sharing it via email. The new age, obviously, it does give people access and everything else. Are other policies in place and information that you share to staff in terms of a narrative of what can be shared and what can't be shared externally via email as an attachment? If so, can you follow the same process as this with your Google Drive?
We do have a policy in place, but whether they read it and acknowledge it is another thing. But yeah, I think we just need to look into the DLP rules really and see how they can help us. And maybe we'll speak to you guys again, and maybe have a session around that. You know, we can tailor it to our organisation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Stuart, if you want a session on DLP, then drop me a line. I can sort something out for you. Just dates and times. We can just get one of our sort of free admin sessions set up with you. It's not a problem at all.
Fab. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks, mate.
Can I ask more widely? I mean, I'm aware we've got quite a good number of people on the call today, and I'm assuming we're all admin at some level. Have you started looking at your DLP rules? Have you got DLP rules in place already? Have you started looking at your trust rules?
We've not. They look like they would be very useful. We've had a couple of incidents of things being shared to audiences that were not appropriate, which we probably could have picked up with this. So I would like to look at it if I had enough time in the day. But this is probably something that should be a priority given what it can prevent. So I think it's something I'll come back to. Yeah,
I agree, Sean. There's a really good point. I think it's now you've got the tools, and remembering it is Education Standards Education Plus. If you are on a fundamentals thing, then perhaps there's a time to consider, do we need a higher level of control on the data? And it's that fine balancing. I know I've already said it, but it's that fine balancing. You want to enable the optimum best learning processes for all your learners and the best teaching processes for your teachers. So if you lock things down too heavily, then the tool just doesn't serve its purpose. At the same time as doing all that you possibly can to keep your data secure. We can't ignore that. That's absolutely crucial. You've got to do that. You have a duty of care to keep these people's data secure and all those things. So it's really important that we get that balance right at the same time. But then that means that if you do leave an opening where certain people, because there's a legitimate reason to allow them to, can share externally, you need to make sure that they are properly trained and fully understand the implication of, there's a risk you could share something you shouldn't. So we need to make sure that you are fully trained and you fully understand the implications. But it's not just about a physical rule written in your admin panel. It's about a training of your staff to make sure that they're fully up to speed and understand the implication of it all. Because it's significant. If someone loses your data, you feel very vulnerable, don't you? That's not a little thing. That's a big thing, and one leak is, not acceptable. So it's hard. And sorry, go on, Chris.
I was just going to say, just to add in there, that message, obviously, to anybody on the call or anybody who's watching this back who subscribes to Education Plus or Education Standard 3C Learning, they want a session on the DLP rules, setting them up and whatnot, then drop me a line. We'll sort it out. Stuart's nice, but he's not the exception here. Everybody's included. So please reach out. That's absolutely
excellent.
fine. No problem.
Good idea.
Thank you.
Okay, good. We're going to move on if that's okay. This is just a new website from Google, which I just think has got some really interesting things in it. They've released the first of 3 reports currently called Preparing for a New Future. And they've done it with a company called Canvas 8, who are a research company in the US. And it just raises some interesting kind of thoughts. I'm interested to see how the whole thing develops. And you'll notice the last one, Reimagining Learning Ecosystems, talks about, the learning environment and learning infrastructure as well from the summary that I've read. So it's just one to keep your eye on that kind of gives you food for thought, really. Just something to think about. It's the first one, Preparing for a New Future, is there, and it's kind of a little bit of crystal ball gazing rather. So it's one just to keep your eye on and keep going back to. And I'll remind you as the second and third parts of the report are released that it's there and available for you to read. Just kind of gives you food for thought, I suppose. This is a similar thing, food for thought. There's a new series of very short videos. I think none of them are any longer than about 5 minutes. And from a whole range of educators and thought leaders in education from right across the world, just giving you their take on what they think is important in education at the moment. Really useful tools if you're thinking about preparing for a PD day. There's bound to be a topic in there that you could use as a starter. That's interesting. Thanks, Stuart. They weren't last week when I looked. So they must have released them this week. So that's good to know. So all 3 parts of the previous slide are all available now. So that's good to know. So I'll have a read of those and report back next month on those. So Teaching for Tomorrow is part of the Google for Education YouTube channel. I've given you a link to each of the individual ones. Some of you may have met Simon Lewis, who's from Educate First in Carlow in Ireland, because he's been on some of our calls in the past. He's one of our customers, but these are people from right across the whole world giving you their take on education, and be nice little starters for discussions in any PD work that you might do, and a chance to go and subscribe to our YouTube channel whilst you subscribe to Google's YouTube channel at the same time. So just to, and it links to individuals and then link to the full playlist on the right when you get the slide deck later on this week. I found this one a bit of a surprise when it arrived in my inbox, because these not in place, and it's just about they started building in higher levels of data loss protection things and management of iOS devices in the last 2 or 3 years, and certainly for kind of paid versions, when you get the higher level of mobile device management, you get a much better deal with these, and you can do much more. But these are some new things that have just recently come in last month, and allow you to make better control or prevent the data getting out through iOS devices. Like I say, I was a bit surprised that some of these things weren't actually in place in the first place. So things like video and images, you don't want to be able to share those really quickly and easily if they're work-related images of students and in your organization and things. You don't want those to go out easily. So these things are now able to manage a little bit better. And on the right, I've put the breadcrumb trail that shows you where you go to get to the management of those particular tools to allow you to do that. If you have someone who uses their own iOS device and has their work account on it, then you can actually manage what they can share across onto their own private bits within that device now. So that's a good thing, I think, and quite a number of new things being added. So that's that one. Stuart mentioned this a little bit earlier, that content managers are now going to be able to share folders within the shared drive, even with someone who isn't in the list of people who are members of that shared drive. So that does offer a potential leak, data leak option there. So you do need to be aware of it. So there is a training implication there for you to make people aware. It's content managers, and it's coming in February. Interesting that they're warning us, because they don't normally warn us this soon into it, because this came out in December. But just to be aware, to get ready for that, think about who are the content managers within those shared drives that the institution has, and make sure that they are fully up to speed with the implication of that, and to be aware that they need to think really carefully about. It's an odd thing, isn't it? Because sharing a folder means that they've got to be aware of all the content of that folder. And that's, if there's 100 documents in there, do they genuinely really know that all those documents haven't got personal information or financial information or health information or whatever? But as we said earlier, if you've got DLP rules in place that prevent sharing of that information, then that would usurp a sharing. So if they do share externally and there's information in there that's not appropriate, then that would prevent that happening, because you've got the DLP rule in place. So another reason to think about those DLP rules and getting those in place properly. What I don't know, and didn't read actually, I meant to read and then didn't go back to it, how that content manager permission interacts with the trust rules. I don't know I presume the trust rule would usurp it, but I didn't actually check that to find out, but I will check and add a note so we know. Worth noting that it's on by default. So if you haven't had a chance to speak to all your content managers and they suddenly realize they can share a folder and don't really think about the implications without having been fully trained and briefed on the implications of it, then so you've got time, because it's coming in February. Precisely when in February, I don't know, but you've certainly got 3 weeks at the very least. So just to be aware that there's a training implication for your institution ahead of this release coming in February. Okay, Google Cloud Search. This is Education Plus, or those people who pay for Cloud Search as a separate app, which you can do. You don't have to have Education Plus. You can still buy Cloud Search as a service. Those of you who are not aware, Cloud Search basically does a full-blown Google search of your account It doesn't break any permissions. So the example I always give is Chris and I work together on Soundtrap, which is a product that we sell. If Chris has got 8 documents with Soundtrap somewhere in the document or in the title, but 4 of them are shared with me, if I do Chris Van Halen and search and Soundtrap, it'll find the 4 that I have permission to see, but it won't surface the 4 that I don't have permission to see. So it doesn't break any sharing permissions, but it gives me all the docs, all the mail, all the calendar invites, all the sites. So I can do quite a sophisticated search of things within the sharing permissions of my account. And I find it a much more useful tool sometimes than going to my Drive and doing a search, or going to my Gmail and doing a search. I find it lets me down almost never. Whereas sometimes if I haven't got all the right information within Mail or Drive, for example, I don't necessarily always find things quite so quickly. Cloud Search seems to find them much quicker for me, which I really like. And you've now got on the API side, you can actually write extra bits of code that will give people further facets that they can search on. And you can see some of the examples there, so they can look at if you use it for support tickets, you can actually prioritize those. You can do fields such as date fields, custom date fields, document creation, document size. So you can build in additional, and I presume it will surface as a search chips that appear across the top, that once your organization's got those additional bits built, but it will require you or your developer, whoever you would use, to build those for you, because you've got to be able to know how to use your APIs and things. But it just allows you to add higher levels of search capability within that, which makes an even more useful tool. And I will very quickly demonstrate Cloud Search at the end, just so people can see it, because it is a fantastic tool. Just in case you haven't seen it, and even people with Education Plus, we are finding haven't always necessarily clocked that they've got that tool, because it does come as part of the Education Plus package. So I'll do a demo of that at the end. This is really nice. I do keep saying this, and I will keep saying this. Google seems to be thinking really carefully about micro improvements in efficiencies. And what this is those email notifications you should get in your inbox. I think you'll still get them in your inbox, but they're now going to start to appear in your alert center. So if you spend most of your time in the admin panel rather than your inbox, then an email notification that you would have got in your inbox, you might miss, but you'll get it in the alert center inside the admin panel. And you can see that the image is not very large for you, but you can see it's basically it's the same format as the email, but it will appear in your alert center inside the admin panel. So you won't necessarily need to go somewhere else for those reminders now. They'll all appear in the same place. So that's kind of quite handy. I quite like that. It just kind of makes it your workflow that little bit more efficient, I think. Oh, okay, yeah. So if anyone in the call using Google Voice, this will affect you. When you made a Google call using Google Voice before, it would make a decision about where was the best signal, whether it was a mobile network or whether it was Wi-Fi. In the past, it made that decision at the beginning of the call, and then it stuck with whatever decision it made. Now it will intelligently switch between the two. So if for some reason your mobile signal drops in quality, but you're still on a strong Wi-Fi, it'll switch to the Wi-Fi during the call. So whatever happens, you will get the best service, whichever one you're on, because it will switch automatically and be constantly monitoring that, even whilst the call is still going on. And you shouldn't notice a change. It does it automatically, of course, but it just makes sure you get the best signal, whichever is the strongest one. There's a number of things there. Client-side encryption is kicking off bigger and bigger. It's now across a number of things on your Drive as well. It's on your calendar now, and they've got an option for you to apply for the beta of client-side encryption on your Gmail, on Education Plus, on Education Standard. So it allows you to add in an additional layer of encryption, one that Google themselves can't see. You need to set it up in the admin panel, and then it's available for people. It just means that those accounts that have got extremely sensitive information that might, or for regulatory purposes have to have a higher level of encryption, that you can now build that in on the client side for that particular person. It just makes them that much more secure. So that's open currently for you to apply for that beta, and the link is on the slide deck. And again, we'll share that out before the end of the week. So if you want to be involved in that beta, then just click on the link and you can fill out the form. Just in case you're not aware, it has to be a super admin on the domain, and you have to be logged in on the domain in order to apply for any kind of beta on a domain. So just to be aware of that, you can't do it unless you're logged in and you're a super admin. Another Google Voice thing now, if you are an organization that's large enough to have offices across the region, for our example, it's across Europe, you can now assign other European numbers. So if you happen to be lucky enough to make regular visits to an office in, I don't know, in Paris or whatever, and you have an office out there, Stuart Marvin's smiling, I wish. Well, you can. Just to be aware, if you're a Google Voice user, you can now assign a voice number for the region. So if someone does call you at the Paris office, it's a Paris number that they call, so it feels like they're calling a local number. So you've got that option should you want to. You can do it across regions. So if you happen to have an office in Bangkok or in New York, then you can do the same, but you need the Premier version of Google Voice to be able to do that. This is the standard Google Voice customers. So the Premier version you can do across regions, standard only within the region. So if anyone's in that position, then we're very pleased for you to have a Paris office, and you can now give it a local number. But it will come to whoever's, come to your device, of course, which is great. Okay, there we go. So another one, I mentioned this yesterday because it's also about end users, but just for you to be aware as admin people that you've got better spam protection in Google Voice now. If Google thinks the call is spam, it'll give you that symbol to let you know that it's spam. It puts it in the spam folder and it sends it directly to voicemail. And of course, if it's an automatic calling system, then it won't leave a message, so no one gets bothered by it. You can label it as not spam, and of course, Google Voice will learn that it's no longer spam, and then it will change the way it responds to it the next time, which just gives you a little bit extra protection from those spam calls. There's an updated experience for exporting your organization's data. Again, this is Education Standard, Education Plus. So for whatever reason you need to export that data, you can now export it by organizational unit or by group. And it's about exported user-generated contents of their documents and all, etc., etc. And you can do it by those two criteria now, which apparently you couldn't do before. Education Standard, Education Plus only. And those are the updates from December 2022. Oh, I've didn't take out Merry Christmas either, did I? There we go. The next update is for that was for Chris's benefit from previous Christmas. I must check my slides decks more carefully. And next updates are Tuesday the 7th of February for the Techy Tuesday ones. Any questions? I noticed there's some comments in the chat. Any I need to respond to?
Let's have a quick rundown while you're just getting rid of the Christmas message there. There's been a few that have been answered. I know there were some comments earlier about shared drives. Obviously, Steve was mentioning that that was an issue that Google have sort of sorted out now, where you could literally, I think you could make a shared drive and you could literally put as much data in it as you wanted to, which you seem to have now resolved. Just see if there's anything else in there. Yeah, no, it's just about it, I think, at the moment, Paul. I know you were going to obviously open it up to the floor, but you were also going to just show off my favourite tool of all time, Cloud Search. Cloud Search. I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
my favourite. I'd pay for that separately if we didn't have it. I love it.
Absolutely. Let me go to a Cloud Search form. Get that in place, and then I'll share my screen.
Just whilst Paul's doing that, just to bottom off that point that Steve was making, it's the shared drives will contribute to your overall limits of storage for your domain. So it's worth being aware and worth employing those limits for that purpose, really, because whilst we can limit individual drive quotas, we haven't been able to do on shared drives up until this point. So that's the why behind why Google have brought this in.
Just to add that before, and appreciate that, Paul, and your input. Happy New Year, like I said to everybody. Is there anybody that's concerned about storage quotas, or anybody that's unsure of anybody that's in a multi-academy trust or a large FE college or anything else, that ask the question on the call, but also reach out to us and we can support you through that. We've been heavily involved in this as a Premier partner and the push to get this sorted quickly. I'm glad Google have responded to it. If you can imagine, we work with some of the biggest universities in the UK and Ireland. Shared drives was starting to become a problem for their storage quota when they've got potentially 75 to 100,000 students on one single tenancy. So you can imagine the complexities. I'm sure it might be a challenge for some primary and secondaries and some multi-academy trusts, but interested to see if anybody's having to do some great work to do it, and if everybody's aware of the additional storage SKU as well. If anybody needs to have a conversation, please do reach out to Chris on that one. And just to make you aware of it, there is a separate SKU for storage. Yeah.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks very much. Okay, so this is Google Cloud Search. Like all the tools, it's in your waffle button. So there's mine on my waffle button, and I've already done a search for Chris's name and Soundtrap, which is the example I mentioned earlier. And you get a whole series of tabs across the top, so you can specify what you want to look for. So there's nothing in sites, for example. There's no Soundtrap groups that I'm aware of, but there are documents in Drive. It doesn't break any sharing permissions. So these are documents that are either shared that all in C-Learning can generally view them, or I'm in the specific share list with a specific permission. Okay, so that's what all these are. But any documents that got Soundtrap in them that Chris owns, for example, I would not be able to see because I've not got sharing permissions for that. And within it, we've got the smart chips. I absolutely love these smart chips since they've been in here. They make such a difference. I can specify a time. I can specify whether it's owned by me or everything, and I can specify a type. So I can be quite specific about precisely what it is that I'm looking for. So there are no PDFs, for example. So it just allows me to find the things that I need to find. And like I say, that I use search in mail. Of course I do. I use search in my Drive. Why would I not? But actually, there are times when, certainly with documents that have been there a while, I'm thinking, I know it was Chris that shared it, but what on earth was it called? And was it a Sheets or was it a Slides? And this gets me there that bit quicker than going to the Drive or to my mail. And it's never yet let me down.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I never search in Gmail, never do it, or my Drive, rarely. I always just come to Cloud Search. You can put in as much or as little information as you need. That's a big improvement as well, Paul. That time, the timestamp on the left. Yeah, because it's one of those. I know I've sent it in the last month or so. It saves me so much time in a week. It really does. Steve, you need to give me some extra tasks to do because yeah. I save a fortune in time on that. But
what I might do is I might speak to Cisco and James and see if I can actually get them to use the new facets and build in an additional search criteria into it, so that when we come to February, I'll show you what that additional. See, it's beyond my technical capabilities, but once it's in place, then it should be available for all C-Learning staff just to go in there and say, oh, we can now add in an additional field because they built it in there. So I'll get it built so that we can see it next time, so you can see what it gives you. And like I say, I need a developer to do it. I wouldn't know where to start. But so that's Google Cloud Search. A fantastically useful tool. Yeah, if you are on the Education Plus, I really encourage you to show it to your staff, because they will be, if you think about how many different kind of balls they have to juggle on a day-to-day basis, they've got all the usual teaching stuff with any responsibility they might have, dealing with external agents, dealing with purchasing of things for their department. So they've got all these different kind of focuses and things that they've got to think about. And of course you're going to think, well, what was that thing about such and such and so on and so forth. So to be able to go to a tool that kind of allows you to focus down to find that thing, I think is really useful. Is there anyone on the call that is already using Cloud Search and is happy with it, likes it?
We've had a look at it, shoved it off in our latest sort of digital strategy meeting to Charlie and Bryony. They were quite impressed with it, so I think they were going to take it forward and roll it out to staff within the organisation.
Yeah,
Charlie likes things like that,
Yeah. Just a quick quick comment in there from Lisa. Yeah, Lisa, it's education plus only, and I think you're on teaching and learning at the moment. So
Yeah.
that would be why you've probably not got access to it, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's okay. No worries. No need to apologize. It is a product that you can buy individually. You can buy it separately as a standalone product, but it is something that comes free with Education Plus.
Yeah.
I've had a play with it, but I think you need to break a habit to start using it properly. It reminds me of when we first started using, well, G Suite as it was, or not actually, Google Apps for Education at the time, which was Google Apps for Education, wasn't it? First time.
Yeah.
It's that mental approach of, right, I want to look for something here. Right, I need to go to Cloud Search rather than just go up to the search bar at the top of Mail or whatever. It's just like when we first moved to Google Apps. It was very much, okay, I want to write a letter. Right, I'm not going to open Word. I'm going to make that conscious. I'm going to break that neural pathway of automatically my cursor going to the bottom left, and I'm then going to go and go into Google Docs. But I think the habit is so ingrained in so many of us. If I want to search for something in my mail, I just go up to the search bar in Mail.
Yeah.
So that's probably why I've not used it too much. And I've
Yeah.
not really struggled to find things in Mail anyway, so I've not had the impetus to start using it.
See, I do. That's my big criticism of Gmail, is I can never find anything. And it might just be me, I don't know. But it's like, I know I've sent that. I remember speaking to Jamie and saying, I've definitely sent that. I know I've sent that email and just not been able to find it. And then when I've looked through Cloud Search, it just seems to be a little bit more granular for me, and it just allows me to put a little bit extra in, and it search is just slightly better. But to be honest, Dave, I've not been working with the G Suite as long as probably everybody else on the call. I've only been with the company for a couple of years, so it's all still fairly new to me. So I've kind of got into that habit now. So that tends to be the first place I go. But I know what you mean. It's difficult to change, isn't it? Once you've got a set way of working, and it's only worth doing if you think it's going to benefit you and save you time. It certainly does for me. But yeah, if you're perfectly happy with your current searching method, then it's there if you need it as a backup potentially, I suppose. If you're not sure whether it's a Docker sheet or an email or something, then it will cover the entire your entire drive. So it is handy for that as well.
Yeah.
One of the things that is in there, and for our organization it's less of an issue because we're quite small, is if you've got a lot of details about people's roles and responsibilities in your directory, if you do a people search, it allows new staff or staff from one other of the schools to find out information about other members of the organization right across the organization. And certainly with large organizations like yours, Dave, that might also be quite useful. It's about thinking about, and actually it sounds like we were crashing the search within Mail and Drive. We're not at all, because there's certainly with now the search chips are there and there's no longer a need to use that drop down to go to the advanced search. It is getting better in those, but I just think Cloud Search kind of and the fact that it brings all of those things together, I quite like that. You've got all the mails and all the documents and so on and so forth into one place is really quite nice.
I guess I'm just old school and I do things the old-fashioned way. I think this is my example for myself of when I'm trying to get new people to adopt new technology. Point myself back to this and realize sometimes that I need to start with the why and get them a really strong example as to how it's going to make their life better, because I've not found that doing it myself yet has made my life better.
Yeah.
I think the other thing for me as well is I'll often be looking for emails, but I'll also be wanting documents that might be not necessarily attached to that email, but a quote that I've sent or something that I've sent in a different format, and it kind of just puts it all together there. I can do a slightly more in-depth search, but yeah, it's what works for you, I guess, isn't it? It's only if it's a benefit to you, use it. If not, don't. But it's definitely something that makes my life a little bit easier, and I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
Good to raise awareness of it, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally agree, Dave.
Excellent. Good. Any other questions? Any other comments? Any not necessarily related to the presentation today, but any questions people have? We've got quite a big team of experienced administrators here. So if you've got a pressing question, now's the time to ask it.
I do, Paul. Sorry, me again. We get in more and more problems where staff will go, maybe going long-term sick. They've stored files in the personal Google Drive, or they've left suddenly, and the line managers need access to those files. Obviously, as administrators, we can't access those personal Google Drives without logging in as that member of staff. Is that right? What is the way around it? Is there a way around it?
So if it's all the files, then yeah, you've kind of got to wrestle that account back, haven't you? You've got to change the password and get in there.
Yeah.
If they're leaving, then you can always transfer the drive, can't you?
Yeah. It tends to be that somebody's gone on long-term sick, and they've got files stored on there that might be related to examinations or assignments that need to be marked and things like that, but it's stored in their personal drive, and the line manager needs to get access to it. And when the person's on long-term sick, I feel a bit sort of reluctant to change their password.
Yeah,
you don't really know why they're off sick and things like that, and you don't want to. You could be off with anxiety and things like that, and if they come back and their password's been changed, it might add to that. So it's a bit of a difficult one, because you can get into shared drives, can't you? But
yeah, absolutely.
Don't believe you can get into personal
it is a
drive.
hard one, isn't it? Because you don't want to add to anyone's anxiety or make them more ill than they already are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, equally, you don't want to be disadvantaging the students that got coursework sat in an account that no one can access.
Yeah.
Dave, yeah, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think this is a good example of where I'd use GAM. So GAM is like the command line tool, and you can change ownership and access. If you know the specific document ID, which you can get using some of the Google admin tools as well. If you go through that, then a GAM command will allow you to make changes to an individual document or a folder without having to change that user's password and log in as them. If you don't use GAM, then I definitely recommend looking into it, because it's tremendously powerful for a wide range of things.
We do use it for pulling up data from the back end of the system. Whether with the line manager be able to give me the actual name of the document or anything like that is another thing. It's a file name, which is the usual question we get.
Yeah,
don't know what it's called.
It's always difficult. You don't know what it's called. You don't know when it was last accessed.
No.
You don't know who owns it. There's an element sometimes of using the search functionality, the audit tools in Google Admin Panel, and if you can get it from that, again, narrowing it down by document type, by owner, by date of last access, sometimes allows you to find the document name and preview it with the line manager stood next to you, and from that you can get the ID of the document to make the change. You've got to judge each circumstance on its own merits, really, haven't you?
Yeah, I can only speak from experience previously in different structures. I would say start to create a structure and culture of shared access to information. So teaching and learning as an example, make sure there's always one other person shared into the classroom. Make sure that there's always a co-pilot in regards to teaching resources, schemes of work, schemes of learning, session plans, all of those kind of things. I would also start to think about, it's a long piece and a big piece of work to start to go backwards and start to put things in team drives, but start to think about the creation of documents that are from this point forward or key and mission critical, should always be in and have the ownership of an organisation rather than individual. It is a big piece of work, but I would say start to do best practice from this point, and then start to review what other key documents you might have that could be a risk to your organisation if somebody was to be on sick or to leave. That would be my advice, and something we put in place in even before team or shared drives came in. I think it will just help yourself, and I think that will mean that the ownership and the autonomy, but the accountability is put onto those line managers and across the organisation, Stuart, rather than it sitting with yourself and your small but wonderful team at colleague Sergei, and I'm sure everybody on the call. You all do great stuff, but you don't have ultimate result and infinite resources. So put the ownership across organisations. Just set the parameters of what you want people to do and who the accountability would sit with. So line manager, head of department, head of faculty, director, and so forth, and just put those in parameters in place would be my advice.
Yeah, thanks both.
I suppose even without any kind of illness and absence, those ought to be in place regardless, aren't they? You know, in your example you gave, Stuart, about exam coursework,
Yeah.
you know, you're actually generating a risk by allowing access to that coursework to only be the student and the teacher. You've created a risk situation, so you need to think about, well, how do we reduce that to make it easily accessible, just in case? And you don't want anyone to be ill, do you? Of course you don't, but you've got to plan for those things and have those systems in place to make sure everything can continue to carry on if the worst does happen and someone does go off ill. Yeah, really good question though.
And the leaving, I think, do you have an exit review document or in your organisations where if a member of staff is leaving, obviously it doesn't get away from illness and long-term sickness, but if a member of staff is is leaving, that they would normally hand in their lanyard, do this, just put it on the checklist, and again the autonomy, but accountability then sits with the person that's doing the exit review, which would be either HR or would be their line manager to conduct that interview. Yes, that could slip through the net and they couldn't do it, but you can then say, well, actually, we need to do this, and that should be a standard practice for an organisation, I would suggest. So, yeah.
Okay.
Because it could be quite substantial for you, Stuart, couldn't it? If you don't get those systems in place, because you're a big organisation, aren't you? Across nine campuses you've got?
7 campuses.
7 campuses.
We've got about 800 staff, so it's a big ask. As Steve said, it's a big piece of work to undertake for all those members of staff, especially the ones who've been using Google for some time now. As Dave said, it's like some of them probably old school in their processes, and the way they do stuff and where they store stuff. It's about changing that culture, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's not helped as well by the fact that shared drives have gone through so many different iterations in time. And I think some people have turned off because there were certain limitations that came in when they were originally shared drives and then changed to team drives and then back to shared drives, and you could do some things and not others. And I think it's kind of been a stuttering rollout of shared drives over the last 5 years or so. And I still don't think it's where it needs to be. I think that if you look at the granularity of sharing permissions in that horrible Microsoft ecosystem, people are used to being able to control things, at that level, and we still can't do that within shared drives with Google. And I much prefer to use Google, but realistically, it's still not there. And Google's response to that is, their aim is to share the world's information, and that things should be open by default. But it still doesn't. There are use cases that it doesn't allow it doesn't lend itself to very well.
Yeah, there are a few things missing, I agree.
So I don't think we've got you to a solution, Stuart, have we? But I think you've had some good suggestions, and it's about a cultural change as well as, thinking about just getting the right people sharing the right things, so that if stuff does happen, you've got, a second person available there to access the documents you need to access, particularly with critical documents like exam coursework and things.
You need to think when people leave as well, you need to think about the process there in terms of how long you keep the data for. Of course, it's not a problem to change their passwords once they've left, but if you suspended their accounts, as soon as you suspend an account, emails start to bounce and so on and so forth, and then you're reinstated and that doesn't happen. So it's quite an involved way of working, and there's a difference between somebody who's off on long-term sick and somebody who's left the organization. And there are still some instances, even with GAM, where we've had to just change the password of somebody who's off on long-term sick. Sometimes to protect them from themselves as well. We have a number of staff who, even though they're off on long-term sick and they need to be focusing on recovery, the temptation's too great for them just to jump on and check some emails and so on and so forth. So we've introduced that sometimes as part of our plan for the well-being of the member of staff who is on sick. But you've got to judge each case on its own merits, haven't you?
Yeah. We just had a discussion about what staff should be able to take when they leave the organisation as well. Especially with the changes to Google Takeout and things like that. Is we've involved HR with this one. Is what are they legally entitled to take? And it's a grey area. It's a difficult one to judge. especially when you've got all sorts of different files stored in their drives.
And what they're legally entitled to take and what they will take are two different things anyway.
Yeah.
But what traditionally, employers have allowed staff to take. I've always taken my teaching resources. I've always taken my teaching resources with me, but I presume there's a clause in all of my contracts that said actually the IP of it rests with my employer, because that's how I created it during my time at that institution. But it was never. It was I was quite open and public about that. Never took coursework or anything like that. Of course I didn't. Never took emails and contacts and things. That all stayed within the organisation. But I would always take the resources that I'd made, which were technically the property of my employer.
I think there's a habit for teachers though, just to I'm going to download my entire drive and take it with me, and then that's where your kind of data loss prevention rules need to come in, because how do you know that within that drive they've not got a Google sheet that they created as a mark sheet or something like that back in 2013? It's very difficult to be sure that you are not allowing them to take any personal data with them. And it won't be being done maliciously, and it's very unlikely ever to be accessed again. But there is a risk there still.
Yeah,
it's all about managing that risk, isn't it?
Yeah,
I agree. And also, it opens so many boxes that we can't go into right now around the ability to use USBs in an organisation and everything else in terms of the potential risk of that. But also, if you allow that, any information, what does that look like? We are being recorded, so the advice would be don't act like the UK government and many politicians of using unencrypted USBs and also printing things off and carrying them in carrier bags when you're going to get the bus. So just be mindful of it. Opens so many different things, and we could probably, and we will be, just so you know, anybody that's a transition year, anybody that's hasn't just had a renewal, we're going to be doing a lot of sessions to our customers, with our customers over the coming 6 months around many different things around adaptive learning, the security centre, DLP, and many different things over the next 6 months, because I think everybody on the call here and that attends the virtual staff rooms will help form a lot of those conversations, because it'll be questions that you've asked that will start to form the information that we share out. So look forward to those. We're just waiting for Google's approval, because they are the keys to the kingdom, and we will be launching those in February to June. So please watch this space, and invites will be coming out as well on those.
Excellent. Great. Fantastic. Excellent discussion today. Thank you very much for your attendance today. That's been really useful. I hope you found that useful. Once the video is recorded and processed, I'll put our logos front and center, and then we'll send them onto YouTube, and you'll get notification from Chris along with the slide deck. I'll update that slide deck, as we mentioned earlier, with the information that Dave shared. So you've got that information as well, about making sure you've got your shared drive quota set up in good time, so you don't get caught out by that, because you don't want them to suddenly become view only, like Dave said. So that would be terrible. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Lovely to meet you all as always. I hope you have a fantastic term, and I hope to see some of you in February.